it's a massively interesting insight into prehistoric culture. Oh wow, can't get... Possibly the bit between our world and the dead. I find it very, very interesting how different cultures bury their dead, because
to many tourists, the Spanish Balearics mean Ibiza's nightclubs, Mallorca's crystal blue waters, and Menorca's quieter laid-back charm. But in this video, we're stepping off the beaches to explore something quite remarkable that this little island in the Mediterranean Sea has to offer. A fabulously preserved collection of monuments that reveal not only how the ancient people here buried their dead, but also what they feared, what they believed, and what they hoped for after death. I'm inviting you to come along with me on an adventure like no other to explore these haunting corners of Menorca, and together we'll learn more about the island's ancient dead. I'm Claire, this is the Wanderlust Way, but that's enough waffle, let's wander.
Welcome to the Naveta de Tudons, which is one of the most important sites on Menorca, especially if you're into your prehistoric history, because it is a funeral tomb, like a chamber. Interestingly though, it's called the Naveta because I've just read somewhere that it looks like an upturned boat, which it does really when you look at it from the side. But yeah, I mean, some people might think this is a bit grim to come and have a look at on your holiday. However, I think it's a fascinating piece of history. So 100 skeletons were removed. There's nobody here anymore. So it is just a prehistoric site of archaeology, shall we say. A fascinating insight into the cultures that were here before us.
Menorca isn't just a holiday island. It holds one of the richest archaeological landscapes on the planet. Generations of islanders have safeguarded the legacy of the Teleotic culture, creating the greatest concentration of prehistoric sites found on any island in the world. It's a heritage so significant that in 2023 UNESCO declared Menorca's Teleotic monuments a World Heritage Site. And this is one of the most famous of them all, the Naveta de Tudons, shaped like an upturned boat. But this is no boat, it is a burial monument. It has stood in use for centuries, from around 1000 BC. Entire farming communities, families or clans laid their dead here. Successive burials gradually pressed earlier remains deeper into the chamber, so skeletons broke apart and mingled together. Excavations revealed the bones of around 100 people, resting alongside pottery, beads, bronze bracelets and weapons. The tomb itself was built using Cyclopean techniques, massive limestone blocks stacked without mortar, forming two superimposed chambers. Bodies were left in the upper vault until the flesh had gone, and then their bones were moved into the chamber below, a true house of bones, designed to hold generations.
It says the architecture of the S. Tudon Naveta, the building of the monument. The S. Tudon Naveta is an elongated monument with a slightly concave front and an apsidal head. A drawing of the plan of the building thus recalls an elongated horseshoe. Its interior contains two chambers, one on the ground floor and another on the upper floor. The latter reached from the antechamber by means of a rectangular shaft. The door giving into the antechamber faces 251 degrees north, that is to say westward towards the setting sun. The monument was built using the so-called Cyclopean masonry technique, that is to say with three layers, the exterior made of large dressed stones of fairly regular shape, the interior made of smaller stones, and the central or intermediate layer formed by a filling of small stones that gives strength to two other layers. The building processes of the Navetas, in which various communities of the surrounding area may have taken part, was most likely as follows. A nearby rocky outcrop was chosen and the necessary stones were quarried by means of wooden wedges and levers. The stones were dragged by people, perhaps with the help of oxen, to the chosen spot. It's possible that they were placed on tree trunks, which were rolled and thus made it easier to move them. Once the stones had reached the site, they were assembled by conveying them up a stone on earthen ramp. When the Naveta was completed, the ramps were removed, leaving the monument to be seen in its entirety. So that must be the second floor.
What strikes me most about these finds isn't the number of stones, it's the details. A bronze bracelet still clasped around an arm. Pots that once held food or drink, now placed as gifts for the afterlife. Even a skull marked by trepanation, an attempt at prehistoric surgery, or maybe a ritual. These small traces bring the Naveta back to life. They remind us this wasn't just a chamber of bones, but a place where people tried to ease the passage of loved ones into whatever waited beyond. When archaeologists excavated and restored this place in the 1960s, they learned a great deal about how it was used. We'll circle back to some of those discoveries later, but for now, let's imagine what a funeral here might have looked like. Navetas were communal tombs, and people of every age and sex were brought here. The body was probably wrapped in an animal hide or a tightly bound shroud before being carried inside. Once in the chamber, the fresh corpse was placed in the centre. To make room, the older bones from previous burials were shifted aside, but always with care. Skulls were set neatly against the walls, while long bones were stacked together in small bundles, an orderly gathering of generations. The tomb itself was likely lit by small lamps, little bowls filled with fat and a wick, throwing a dim glow across the chamber. Around the body, pottery vessels held food and drink left as offerings, and occasionally the deceased was buried with something personal, like a bracelet or a simple tool. Excavations also turned up something unexpected. Thousands of tiny mouse bones. For years it was thought the rodents had nibbled at the remains, but now archaeologists believe that these were owl pellets, the regurgitated leftovers of the birds that roosted in these dark spaces too. And in this very tomb, one unusual find stood out. A bone plug carved with concentric circles. It was part of a container, a horn or a wooden tube, used to store locks of hair. Before the burials, hair was dyed red, then some was cut and kept as a keepsake, a final intimate remembrance of the person now joining their ancestors.
Tickets, if you want to come, are just €2 each. Just pay cash when you get here. You don't need to pre-book or anything. But it is only open, I think, till 3 o'clock. But if you go on the Google, it gives you the time for the day that you're there. But we've got a free leaflet as well, so that's a bonus.
This place is just one piece of Menorca's story of the dead. To really understand how the islanders faced mortality, we need to travel to another site, a whole necropolis carved into the cliffs where the rituals of life and death played out on an even larger stage. Let's head there next.
Welcome to the Necropolis de Cala Morell, which is another interesting site in Menorca's history. Necropolis de Cala Morell. During late prehistoric times in Menorca, people buried their dead in large cemeteries consisting of hypogea or man-made caves. These caves were dug out of the rock and were usually to be found in cliffs overlooking gullies and the coast, as well as in rocky outcrops in the vicinity of their villages. The necropolis at Cala Morell is typical of the cemeteries during the late Teleotic period, 500 to the 1st century BC. They were very often located in cliffs in ravines that led down to the sea. After the Romans conquered the island in 123 BC, the necropolis of Cala Morell continued to be used for several centuries.
Make sure you walk in the footholds that are there.
Oh, that is good advice, that. Oh, it's very beautiful. nice and shaded here. I find it very, very interesting how different cultures bury their dead. Wow. Now you don't have to pay to get in here, you just sort of walk around.
Free death.
It's free. Let's go and have a look. Let's go and have an explore. Probably my recommendation would be, if you come, don't wear flip-flops like I am. It's not that easy. Oh wow. Ooh, I'm getting a bit of an eerie feeling in here though. Oh, I'm not enjoying this.
The word necropolis literally means city of the dead, and here on Menorca's rugged north coast, just a short drive west of the Naveta de Tudons, which we just saw, you can walk straight into one of the island's most haunting sites. The necropolis sits quietly at the side of the road, opposite rolling countryside and panoramic sea views. There is no ticket booth, there's no guide waiting to tell you what's what, there's just a scattering of signs and the freedom to explore at your own pace.
How did you get up there?
Steps.
Ah, that's the giveaway, is it? Right, I want to go up there. I've got FOMO. Now we're not sure, but obviously there are raised bits here and here. We're in a sunken bit here. We could do with a historian, a proper historian, being with us, explaining all this. Because I'm sure there's some fascinating information. Like, what was that for? What's that? Why is this hole here? What was that for? If anybody knows the answers to these questions, please do let me know in the comments. One thing I have noticed as well is that these holes on the outside as well, and one there, and that there's these things that come down which look like they've been carved in, perhaps for some kind of liquid, maybe to keep the rain off, I don't know, but then underneath there's these troughs. It's fascinating. I'll come in a minute. I'm just having a look at this bridge here. Wow. Yeah, so what are these for? Maybe for offerings. Maybe. Very peaceful. There's nobody else here.
But since visiting, I've dug a little deeper into this story, and what I found makes this place even more fascinating. These caves were in use for over 1,000 years, right into the early Roman era. Unlike the Naveta, a single communal tomb for one farming clan, this was a whole cemetery, with 14 burial caves carved into the ravine. Some were simple ovals, others far grander, with carved pillars and facades that resembled little temples. And the funeral rites here, well, they were nothing short of ghoulish. The dead, they were laid out with their belongings, then they were often covered in quicklime, which is a caustic powder that strips away the flesh, leaving the bones chalk white. Families would return to the caves, they would place offerings of food and drink in the forecourts so their ancestors would never go hungry. It's a slightly different atmosphere to the Naveta. There, the bones were neatly ordered in stone, the ship of eternity. Here, whole families gathered among the cliffside tombs, sharing food, firelight, and ritual with their dead. A true city of the departed.
It says, the world of the deceased about 2,000 years ago in Menorca. This hypogeum, like all the others in the necropolis, is an artificial cave manually hewn out of the cliffs overlooking the ravine at Macabre. It was used as a collective burial chamber by the island's inhabitants towards the end of Menorca's prehistory. Oh, the cave is more or less circular in shape, with a hollowed out patio or cavity in front and a rectangular entrance slightly higher. An archaeological dig of the cavity was undertaken in 1995 when a number of human bones were found, as well as some fragments of pottery. So what else does it say on this sign? Well, it says, when it rains, the cavity fills up, creating a temporary pond. The cavity might have had some symbolic significance, possibly as a transitional area between the world of the living and that of the dead. It might have been used for performing rituals or funeral rites for the deceased, or for conferring solemnity to the place, or possibly for impeding the entry of scavenging animals into the cave. It has recently been discovered that clay vessels had been deposited in these types of cavities, within which the remains of neonatal babies had been buried. There is lots to explore here, that's for sure. So that's the cavity that I was telling you about a minute ago. Possibly the bit between our world and the dead. We've got another hypogeum here, 2,000-year-old collective tomb. More or less circular in shape. And again, you've got this which would have filled with water, which is either symbolic or could have been used to stop animals getting in. The deceased would have been laid out inside the cave in a wooden pallet on the ground or in a coffin with their grave goods. Incinerations were also performed. The body would be laid out on a funeral pyre. Limestones would be placed on top and burned. The fire would consume soft tissue and the limestone would convert to quicklime. Once everything had cooled down and hardened, the remains could be collected and deposited inside the cave. Okay, learning every day is a school day, guys.
This just feels like a world away from how we handle funerals today in Britain. On this channel we've visited the elaborate Victorian graves of Highgate Cemetery, and we've uncovered the unusual way that the dead once travelled by train. But we've never stepped back as far as this in time before. Here in Menorca, we can envisage a time when the bodies were laid to rest in the cliffside, in the cave, with the sea as their backdrop.
Would I recommend you come? Okay, so if you're interested in history, definitely come. Please don't come wearing flip-flops, which is what I've done, because it will make your trip a lot harder. Also, if you've got mobility issues, it's not going to be easy. It's very... obviously lots of different levels, but if that's not a problem and you're looking for an adventure, then feel free to come over here. Like it is free. It's an interesting insight into burial rituals of Menorca's history.
Amidst all this rock and these empty chambers, it's hard not to think about how fragile life is. Studies of Menorcan burials show high child mortality. Around half of all children died before the age of 5, and many adults rarely lived beyond their late 20s. Only a few reached old age. So every death here was keenly felt, every burial an urgent ritual. Imagine torchlit processions descending into the ravine, the grieving family carrying their loved one, laying them among the bones of their ancestors, sprinkling lime over the body and then sharing food in their memory. For these people, death was not an ending, it was a transformation, a passage into the company of our ancestors, ensured by ritual and stone. Thank you once again for joining me on this journey into Menorca's ancient dead. I'd love to know what you think. How do you feel about the ways ancient civilizations dealt with death? Are they really so different to our practices today? And here's one final question. The remains once laid to rest in places like the Naveta are no longer here. They're now in the Museum of Menorca. Do you think it's right to move people from their final resting places centuries later? I mean, we've done it in Egypt, haven't we? We've brought people back from the pyramids into the museums. But what do you think? Is it right? I've been Claire, this has been The Wanderlust Way. There is a brand new episode coming next week, and this time we're going to be back in the UK, uncovering a dark chapter from Yorkshire's past. But if you haven't quite had your fill of Menorca, I've got a couple of midweek videos coming up that focus on the sunshine and beaches. A little contrast to balance out all this talk of ancient death. But until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep wandering.